Hello, comic book guys and gals, and welcome to Comic Mag Musings Live. This handsome devil is your host, Bill Miller, and this nearly as handsome devil is your co-host, Roger from Metarock. How you guys doing? Roger, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Thank you, Bill. Doing well. I think you need to see the optometrist there, but otherwise,
quite possibly.
I
Who
think
said that? Where are you anyway? But,
otherwise you're on the ball there. Really excited to be back on the retrospective with you. It's been way too long, but of course, mostly my fault. I've had a lot going on here and there. But we're going to delve into this very unusual series. Uneven, I would say, it would be the best way to describe it. But really excited though to finish this up because Werewolf by Night is now, we had that Halloween special on Disney,
right.
And supposedly he's going to be doing something, probably a little more. Even though when we started this, it was before all that talk. But
correct.
But yeah, I'm excited to finish the sucker off and see what your perspective is and delve into it a little bit deeper.
Likewise, I am as well. And, did you see the Disney special?
I did not. Like I said, I don't see much television or stream things, but I should have, and I didn't.
Nor do I, but it still holds up. I recommend you giving it a watch.
I will see it. I think I'm going to be a little less busy here in a few weeks, and I'll make it a point to see it.
Excellent. All right, so we left off. Obviously, we covered the Marvel Spotlight in the first part of the series, as well as the title proper, numbers 1 through 19. So for part 2, we will be covering Werewolf by Night numbers 20 through the end of the series, number 43, as well as the giant-size werewolf issues. But before we get started, let's shout out this illustrious chat, shall we? We have Las Cruces, 19 and 71. How are you, sir? Thank you very much. Wishing me a congratulations on 800 subscribers.
That's right.
It's
you made
been
it,
a baby crawl through broken glass for about 3 or 4 years now, just to get to that point. But I don't do it for the subscribers, so that's just a bonus. I'm just excited to be part of the community, hang out with people like Roger, and share my passion for comic books. I think that's why
it's taken me, 5.5 years to get to 1600. So it is a grind there, but we stay true to who we are. We don't try to. We could do these cheap videos that would get subscribers, but that's not what we're about. So
correct.
I think that's the way to do it, to be true to yourself.
Yep. And that's the way I like to do it. I put on things that I like, and hopefully a couple other people like it. And that's always been good enough for me. But thank you nonetheless, Las Cruces. I appreciate it. We've got Naman, the comic bookworm, who said he will be listening, but not watching because he's pretending to be working. All right, Naman, your secret is safe with us, sir.
With us, yes.
We have Alex, Big Blue. Alex, how are you, sir? Good to see you. He said the Halloween special was the best thing in the MCU for a while. Great stuff. I thought it was pretty good. Really took some liberties with the source material, but that's okay. I get that going into it. They're going to get people like me. And so their plan is, how do we get new viewers that aren't familiar with the source material? That's who they're targeting. So I get I'm not their target audience. We've got Gary B., the uptight comic guy, says, good evening, all. Good evening, Gary. Good to see you, sir. Thanks for stopping in. He's probably here for the Conan Werewolf by Night team-up that doesn't take place in any of these issues. No, he's not.
Not in the universe that I read, no.
No. All right, so let's get this thing started off. Werewolf by Night number 20. Gil Kane did a vast majority of the covers for this series. And from this point, I think Doug Mensch wrote all of them.
Yes, that's correct.
And I think, except for maybe 1 or 2 issues, maybe 1 issue, I think Don Perlin did the interior art. for all of them as well.
Yeah, I think he didn't do a few of the giant size, but he did, I think, all the regular.
All but I think one of the regular. I think there was
Okay.
a fill-in artist for one of them.
Okay.
So yes, there it is in all its glory. So Jack and Raymond Coker, they just to bring everyone back, you know, Jack Russell's a werewolf. He has a neighbor in his singles apartment. That's so funny, like some swinger apartment or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Specifically for singles.
The Colton House.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Colton House is the name of it too. He has a neighbor who is also a werewolf named Raymond Coker.
What are the odds of that happening?
Yeah. What do you know? It's a small world, I tell you. But at any rate, they find out that one another is cursed with lycanthropy. And they also find out that one of the ways to defeat the curse is to kill another werewolf. Now, they vowed not to kill one another, which is good.
They said,
no, hey, they don't necessarily
we're
like
good. We're good. Yeah.
Yeah. But Jack can't control his werewolf alter ego. Raymond Coker can. So that is a big difference.
Yeah.
And
through those herbs and meditation, he can control.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they're being spied upon by
another werewolf. What are the odds? I tell you, they are.
I tell you.
Later, Jack and Clary, who is one of his roommates, who's also an actress, they're out at dinner, and an attorney named Gerardo, I think it's Gerardo Cabal.
Correct.
He is flirting with Clary, and he offers her a ring out of his admiration for her and her acting ability. So she doesn't have great acting ability, but at any rate, Jack swipes the ring, and Cabal had said that he had found it among with some other things in the movie studio in a trunk, because he was
the executor, I think.
Yeah, executor of the
Joshua
will.
Kane's.
That's exactly right. Of Joshua Kane's will, correct. And that's the trunk in which Jack and Raymond Coker found the tome that talked about the cure for lycanthropy by killing another werewolf.
Right.
And they encountered Baron Thunder. So at any rate, this attorney, Cabal or Cabal, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He gives Jack the committee's address. And the committee had hired somebody who kidnapped Lissa, his sister, Jack's sister.
Right. Couple issues back, Mia Mayhem. Yeah.
Correct. Right. And so Jack rushes off to rescue her. Unbeknownst to him, this ring lets him change at will he lets him change into the werewolf when there isn't a full moon.
Right. So there isn't a full moon at this point, but
correct.
He just starts thinking, boy, I wish that I could become the werewolf.
And when he's his bestial self, he still retains Jack's mind, which is very important.
Very important.
That's typically not the case, at least when Jack turns into a werewolf. Well, he defeats Baron Thunder. He rescues Lissa. And we find out at the end that the third werewolf that was watching Raymond and Jack is, in fact, Lieutenant Hackett of the police department, who has been on Jack's case and has been fully investigating these werewolf sightings around the city.
Right. And he loses the ring as he's diving outside of the mansion. He gets caught. His hand hits the side of the window, and the whole mansion goes up in smoke, ostensibly killing Baron Thunder and Mia Mayhem, who remained inside. Yeah.
And destroying that ring.
And destroying the ring. You would think.
Figure,
right? You figure that's exactly what happened. Okay, so you want me to take the next one here?
Sure.
Hold on, let me look at my notes here. So this one here is, I think we did. No, maybe we didn't. We talked about it offline, but the previous issues were by other creators, and Doug Monk or Munch took over the series, and I think he took some characters and he sort of molded them a little bit differently than what was originally planned. Okay. Like we got no hint that Hackett, was like involved with Cabal and Joshua Kane and any of that stuff.
Correct.
Right. But what happens here is that Lieutenant Hackett goes to visit Cabal to ask, hey, what would happen to the ring, that was in that chest? And he says, well, I gave one was taken by Jack Russell and he's wearing the other one.
Right.
And then he starts to tell him the story about how Kane got this chest that belonged to Alfric, the Mad Monk, which was
correct
the original sorcerer that cursed the werewolf and all that way back when. So he kills Cabal, Lieutenant Hackett does, takes the ring, right? And now, guess what? He can now transform into a werewolf with that ring. So not only now maybe there were different rings, but not only does it give you your ability to turn into a werewolf if you are a werewolf, it gives you the ability to turn into a werewolf if you're not a werewolf.
You're not a werewolf, correct.
Yeah. So
right, and that was a little bit of backtracking because in the previous issue, Hackett was already a werewolf. So yeah, they backtracked.
Yeah, right. That was a flash forward and then a flashback. That's true. Right. So now he's like, I'm going to go after Jack because he's got the other ring, and now he knows that he's a werewolf because he had been tracking him and Coker.
Correct.
So he just drives around because he knows now it's a full moon, and he finds them, and they're both like in this alley talking, and he just attacks them. Hackett just attacks them, and both of them. I mean, and he does pretty good, but after a while he figures out, hey, I can't handle both of these, so he starts to run away, goes to these rooftops, but he's caught by the Jack Russell werewolf, and crashes into this foundry, like a smelting plant.
Correct.
Right, and they're fighting on these elevated walkways. And Hackett has just got it in for him, and he's actually got Jack Russell right over one of the big molten metal vats, and he's about to push him in there when Coker jumps down from the outside onto that walkway, pushes the werewolf lieutenant into that vat, thus killing him and breaking the curse. So Coker now becomes human.
Right.
And unfortunately,
breaking the curse for Coker specifically.
For Coker only, right. So apparently even an artificially transformed werewolf that you kill,
it still works.
Breaks the curse, right. And so then he laments that it was him and not Jack Russell that broke the curse, but he was like, well,
but relieved nonetheless.
And then Jack Russell goes off into the night.
Right. Plus, he has to live with the thought that he killed somebody else, which I think is heavy on his conscience. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Although obviously Hackett would have murdered Jack Russell werewolf if he hadn't intervened. So you could justify it that way. Yeah.
Right.
So
similar to. Real quickly, let's shout out some more.
Yeah.
Folks, Eddie Rodriguez.
Hey, Eddie.
Hello, gents. Hey, Eddie, welcome. We've got John's Comics with Kids. Said, how's it going, Handsome Bill and Roger? You might not have said that, but we've got Damien, Sleeper Reader.
Usual paraphrasing.
666. And Ahoy Captain. We got Captain Comics in. We've got Tat Comics. And we've got Otaku Tour Guide, OTG.
Otaku.
Good to see you. And we got Steve from I Love Disney and Comics. Right. We got the whole gang in here. All right. So this is.
Right. So I just want to mention one thing, Bill, is that I think that the dispatching of Hackett and the transformation back to human of Coker was not the original plan, because remember Frederick and Wolfman had the previous issues, and I think they had a bigger plan for those two.
I too. I think they had some team ups actually in mind between the two of them, and I think ultimately, I think that one, I think there would have been some rivalry going on, and the possibility of curing the curse by killing one another would have come to a head at some point.
Yeah, agreed. I agree.
But
it just has that vibe
Jack
about it.
Yeah.
No, I did not slab my mustache. I had to cut it off temporarily because my mother, well, let's just say that she likes me without a mustache. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Sly, how are you? Now I think Giant Size number 2
is next. Yeah.
Comes in here.
Yep.
Yeah. Chronologically.
Yeah, right here.
All right. That one.
Let me take it out of here because the glare is rough and I want to show
that one's great. That's a fun read. Frankenstein's monster kind of joins the fray.
Yeah.
So with
you knew what was going to happen eventually, right?
Well, when you have a vest as sweet as his, you've got to put it. You got to bring it into as many series as possible.
Yeah, that
but
thick fur vest.
Yeah, how ridiculous is that? But I love it.
I mean, well, he is from the Balkans, I guess. So
that's true.
You would need it up there, but you know.
I'd love to tackle that one at some point as well. But he heads to LA. He's interested in the Brotherhood of Balls soul transfer experiments that they're conducting.
Yeah, he overhears these hobos in New York.
They're talking about it, exactly.
And he jumps on a train, and then he has to jump out of it off a cliff because the police are there. Yeah, they makes it to LA. Yeah,
but he makes it to LA. He wants his soul transferred into a different body, a new body. They tell him that once they virtually sacrifice someone, in this case it's Lissa, Jack's sister, then that can be done. But during the ceremony, when they're going to do this, Jack interrupts as the werewolf. He breaks in and he starts fighting Frankenstein. He interrupts the ceremony. He's knocked out by Frankenstein, who has tremendous strength.
Yeah.
The cultists decide, hey, let's use this werewolf instead. Let's sacrifice him. And Frankenstein's cool until he realizes that the soul transfer isn't really to help him out, to transfer his soul into a different body. It's to use him as a vessel to allow Satan to inhabit his body.
Yeah,
and
they got big mouths, those cultists, I tell you.
Yeah, they do. And so he and the werewolf at this point team up, and they attack the cult.
Yeah. And the leader of the cult gets crushed under an inverted cross while they were trying to get out of there.
Right.
And I think Buck shows up and outside when Lisa escapes. And then, unfortunately, they start a fire, and the whole mansion crumbles into from the cliff into the ocean. And they think maybe that Jack Russell is dead at this point, but of course,
a lot of fires being started and consuming buildings in this series.
A lot, yes, yeah, a lot of fires, a lot of crumbling, a lot of crushing. Yeah, that happens quite a bit. Yeah. All right. So next is 22. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Trev, the shipping guru. Good to see you, Lord Tatman.
Hey, Trev. Hey, Lord Tatman. Haven't seen you in a while, buddy. Good
Welcome.
to see you there. Yeah, that's
22.
Man, we got some heavy hitters here. Let me get my notes here.
I can
22.
start it if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So this was a fun one. I think it was like a 2 or 3 issue series arc. But it was fun. So there's an actor who used to be incredibly handsome, and he was disfigured during a stunt that went awry that he insisted upon doing.
That's right.
And he went crazy because of the subsequent disfigurement that happened to him. And
his head fell into the fire. His head fell into the fire and it was all burned off.
Correct. It's all burned up. So he has a mask on, and he takes on the persona of Atlas. Yeah. And he has this huge gray man bone oh, I'm sorry. I mean, an ass bone.
An ass jawbone. Yeah.
Yeah, jawbone of
Yeah.
an ass or something
I think
that
he
he
kind
uses.
of is following Samson in the Bible, where
Correct.
Samson actually kills a whole army of Philistines. He even says he's like this throwback kind of guy. He's like biblical Middle Ages. You know?
I think part of that's from his
acting. Yeah,
acting training. Correct. Right.
exactly.
Right.
He's a little touched in the head. You know.
Yep. He's got a long history of stage acting. But he starts murdering people, beginning with the producer of the movie upon which he was injured. And so he's just
Simon Kolb, I think his name was.
Correct. Yep. Simon Kolb is right. And when he's leaving, he finds the werewolf, Jack, on that producer's property outside, knocks him out, and then the cops are coming, so he takes off. But then Jack wakes up as Jack in the morning, and the police are there, and he gets arrested as the primary suspect for the murder of the producer.
Yeah, imagine that. There's a dead guy in the mansion, and
that'd be a tough one to explain.
He was thrashed by the jawbone, and he's essentially beaten to a pulp, but he manages to crawl out of the fountain. And of course, when he wakes up there, he says, "Lieutenant Northrup," and he's like, "What are you doing here?" "I have no idea. I was a werewolf." He didn't say that, but he's like, you know.
And Northrup is kind of like the police successor to Hackett.
Right, exactly. And he's actually trying to find out what happened to Hackett.
Correct.
During all this, and they obviously there's no body; it's been disintegrated in that smelter.
Yeah.
So but he looked at the notes. He looked at the notes that Hackett had, and he noted that he thought that Coker was suspiciously possibly a not a werewolf, but he said he's possibly a murderer or something.
Right.
Anyway, okay. But I
think that's where that one ends.
That's where that one ends. Yeah. And Atlas goes on his way, again, to find the rest of the cast to
right.
slaughter.
Presumably at this point, because I don't think they fully reveal his motive.
No, not yet. But right. Buck and the next, I think in this issue, finds out, Jack describes the guy to him, and he says, "Hey, that sounds like Steve Rand," who, and that's when we flash back to all what you said before about how he was like handsome and all that. So, and we find out he was in the hospital, and he had to be accosted there. And this happened actually 5 years ago. So he's had 5 years to build up his body. He's incredibly built, super strong, and just a raving lunatic.
Correct.
So his next target, while Jack is talking to Buck at his place, Atlas shows up there, and to get Buck. Now Jack had given Buck a gun with a silver bullet, so in case he got out at night and was about to hurt him, he just said, "Kill me." Remember that?
Right. Correct. That's a very important part of this. And real quickly, Buck had bailed Jack out of prison or out of jail. That's why Jack's out now. Yeah. And Buck had written. He was the writer for this movie. That's why Buck found out he's going to be targeted as well.
Right. He wrote the screenplay.
Correct.
For it. Right.
Yep.
And also Atlas killed the actress from that movie here. He just nailed her with a jawbone as she fell in the pool, drowned, dead. Yep. No blood or nothing. Comics code, right? But right. But it was a pretty violent hit, It
was.
So okay, so during that skirmish with Buck and at his house, the moon rises, right? And so they sort of do like a road trip on land here, and they're fighting each other, and they end up at Groman's Chinese Theater, where they have the walk of fame there with all the different prints.
Correct. The hands in cement. Yes. Yep.
Right. And Atlas, gets a pretty good, hits in there. The werewolf kind of goes up on the top of it, and Buck shows up there. He followed them, right?
Yep.
And And when Atlas attacks Buck, the werewolf comes down and starts to tussle with Atlas because Atlas was about to nail him with that big jawbone and kill him. And Atlas throws him up against a statue or something and knocks the werewolf out. And he's about to come down, the Atlas, about to kill Jack. And
Correct.
Buck is right behind him, and he doesn't have a choice. He shoots him in the back, Atlas. And then Atlas sort of says, you know, hey, I just went mad. I'm sorry. I didn't really mean to kill anybody. I don't know. Really weird kind of ending there. He dies. And of course, the police arrive. And, you know, as while that happens, Werewolf comes back to consciousness and gets away.
Right.
And, you know.
Right. And the police are like, hey, we understand. You had to do it kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, Buck kind of feels a little guilty, but it was either Jack or Atlas. So
right.
Put that away.
Ray, man, good to see you. Thanks for stopping in.
Yeah, this is the one with the. I don't even know if I flipped it, but this is the one with. They don't show Atlas very well in these covers. I was kind of disappointed about that.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, he's got a cool look to him.
Yeah, well, a bit. Yeah, I would at least like to see that jawbone. You know.
Yeah.
All right. Remember this guy?
24, yes. Deprave. Yes. So Jack finally gets evicted from Colden House, his apartment. He stays with Buck. Buck says, hey, let's visit this scientist that I heard about who's creating some Jekyll and Hyde formula. I think he might be able to help us find a cure for your lycanthropy, right?
Yeah, and remember his sister is
Lisa, right?
Yeah, is getting close to being 18 too. So
correct. They don't know if she's going to also start changing or if it's just the male progeny.
Right. They don't know for a fact. That's true.
Yeah. So he's hoping maybe we can at least isolate the bestial side of you or something like that, similar to the Jekyll and Hyde. And that's Depraved right there in the green.
That's Depraved.
Yeah. And so the scientist is in his lab, you know, in the meantime, swapping around formulas, and his wife is cleaning. And while she does, she mixes up the good and the bad formula, or the Jekyll and the Hyde versions.
Yeah, because he is like the one of those, you know, scientists where he's just saying yes, dear, yes, dear. He's not listening to his wife.
Oh yeah, he's
not paying attention, and when she's dusting, she moves one beaker in front of the other.
Yep.
And he had them in a certain order. So
correct.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so he needs a test subject. And so, like any scientist, of course, he says, well, I'd be a good test subject. So he drinks what he thinks is the Dr. Jekyll portion, but he actually drinks the Mr. Hyde portion. And he turns into a rampaging monster named Deprave. Deprave encounters the werewolf in the street at night because they were trying to drive over to his house, but this is a night when Jack's going to transform. He does. They battle. The cops come. They capture the werewolf, but Depraved runs off and escapes, at least for the time being.
Yeah. They show up at the house, and Depraved just knocks Jack and Buck out. But right after, you know, of course, you you sort of have to think, right, that you would know when the moon is rising if you're going to turn into a werewolf. But Jack seems to keep.
They mention it, but they seem to really cut it close. It's almost like they're like, yeah, that shouldn't take us more than an hour. And it doesn't make any sense in a lot of these cases.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you could have waited till the next day. No,
it's got to happen right now. We never knew about this guy before today, but we've got to see him right now.
Yeah, don't go in the morning. Don't hole yourself up in a cell somewhere. Wake up in the morning and then go there. That would make good stories, Bill.
Yep, too easy.
Right? All right. So in this one again, Deprave is now roaming the streets of, I think, Pasadena.
Hold on, Darren. Good to see you. Werewolf by lunchtime, of course, not by night. And we have Psychedelic Comics. Thanks for stopping in. We appreciate it.
Great. So
this is 25?
Yeah, they fight into this grocery store. The police show up, and Northrop has a trap. He has like a net at the back of the store.
All planned out. Yeah.
Yeah. and he goes in with his gun and to shoo them out the back. Depraved goes first, and he apparently gets. They didn't drop the net in time,
right?
But then when the werewolf comes, they got him, right?
Yep, and they got him good. He's trapped.
They got him good. He's tangled up in there. He can't get out. All right.
Yep.
But Northrop gets too close to the net, and the werewolf grabs him and pulls him in.
That's exactly.
So now they're both tangled in there.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Get me out! Get me out!"
And the cops don't want to shoot or anything, right, because they might hit him.
They could hit. So Northrop shoots, right, and then it all goes quiet, and he's like, "All right, now you can get me out." But the werewolf apparently is a little bit more canny than they thought. He's playing possum, even though he was shot in the leg. And he gets away. And Northrop's like, "You guys, all that."
Right.
Now Northrop has a silver bullet, by the way.
Correct.
But not in this case. He didn't get shot by a silver bullet. So they follow a trail of blood.
Yeah.
Yeah. They follow the trail of blood from the werewolf, and of course it leads them right. He finds Depraved, the werewolf, beating up this couple.
Yeah.
And of course he's like, "Well, I remember that guy somehow. He has like some kind of memory about it."
Yeah, like latent memories of people, especially he didn't like.
You think?
Yeah.
And the battle ensues, and actually Depraved Dietrich actually reverts back to human.
Correct. The formula wore off.
Yeah. As Werewolf slashes him and throws him up against the car and messes him up good. Messes up real good. Right.
Redditch.
And after that,
right? Redditch.
Yeah. Is that did I say Dietrich? Maybe that's Dietrich Redditch. I don't remember what that guy's name was. So and then after that the werewolf goes by. Then there's a time jump.
Right. A month.
Because they think it's touch and go whether Reddick is going to survive.
Right.
And then apparently Buck and Jack Russell find out the hospital he's in, that he's, okay.
Right.
And they go visit him.
Because they still want to visit him to see if he can help them out. Right.
They still want that the good or the Dr. Jekyll formula. And he agrees. I mean, at first he's like, you guys are messing with me, but eventually he agrees to give him the formula. He calls his wife.
Right. But he agrees because he's like, this can further my research. Yeah, maybe not necessarily out of altruism to help him out.
I got a guinea pig here, know?
Yeah.
So that night is another full moon. Jack takes the formula, the good formula, right? And at first, the moon rises,
like
and he
doesn't. Working.
It just delays it a little bit, but then he turns into the werewolf, leaves Jack's house, and as he's leaving, he's accosted by the Hangman. Remember him from from issues 11.
We thought he was dead. Jack had left him for dead.
Yeah. Left him for dead in that basement or whatever, but apparently not. He was actually after Redditch, Depraved, but
we ran into the werewolf, right?
Right, ran into the werewolf on the way to the hospital. So that's where that issue ends. Him hanging, he's on the top of a building and he's hanging, by the throat, choking as the cliffhanger goes.
Right. The werewolf is correct.
Yeah, the werewolf is. Yeah.
Right. Biggie, good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. All right, next one is Werewolf 26. The werewolf obviously fights the Hangman. He gets out of that predicament. The Hangman vows to get Depraved. And then the very next night, there's a 3-way battle between the werewolf, Depraved, and the Hangman. And ultimately, it ends in the Hangman being arrested by the police. Finally. Yeah. So big battle scene. And of course, a lot of psychobabble reiterated by the Hangman as far as why he does what he does and how he can't believe that he's being arrested when he's holding up, or at least extending the virtues of society and this, that, and the other. But ultimately it ends with him being arrested by the cops.
Yeah, he insults the cops. He calls them something liberal something or others, and of course he gets arrested. Now remember, Depraved Redditch was kidnapped by Hangman from the hospital.
Correct.
And he was actually going to get killed, but he's like, I'm not going to kill you while you're unconscious. He was unconscious at that point.
Right.
So he takes him back to his lair, and there he transforms back into Depraved. And that's where the three-way battle ensues, because Jack.
Right. When he wasn't Depraved, he's like, fight me like a man kind of thing, and he didn't want anything to do with fighting him. Right.
No.
Not until he
apparently
transformed.
That triggered the formula that was still, dormant in there.
Right.
Anyway, so I mean, I don't know, that the ending came a little bit too quickly. It seemed a little
I agree.
rushed.
Yeah, it felt like they didn't have enough for another issue.
Yeah.
But probably had enough to not be wrapped up so quickly in that issue. It feels like they were stuck in the middle with that one.
Yeah, it just seemed like, it was not. It was a very truncated ending, because there were slashing, and they slashed against Depraved and all that, and then they start running away, and then the Hangman just gets captured.
I think if they had more time, they probably would have gone back and cut out some of the fight scenes and extended the ending a little bit better, a little bit more naturally. But
I agree. I don't know. It seemed, I don't know. It just left a bad taste in my mouth, for lack of a better reason. Word.
Yeah, I liked the arc itself, but
yes,
agreed. I didn't particularly like that issue.
Yeah, the ending was a bit of a letdown. All right, so I think the next one is Giant Size 3, Bill.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, good. And let me take this one out. This is very interesting because we learn a little backstory here.
Am I doing that one, or are you doing that one?
Go ahead if you want to. Yeah.
All right. So Jack, he's having some nightmares about fighting some silver-spiked metallic creature, right? And he has visions of Topaz calling him to some strange castle to help her out. He visits his stepfather / uncle, Philip, and he finds that the home is all in disarray and shambles. And so someone is looking for the Darkhold, is ultimately what he finds out.
That's his conclusion, that it was ransacked because they're trying to find the Darkhold. Yeah.
Correct. Right. And Philip had just returned from Transylvania.
Right.
Because who doesn't go there for vacationing? But no, that's where the family was and everything else. But
that's their summer home over there.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. He found out that there was a series of deaths around that area that were blamed on some gypsies and a blonde girl who happened to be with them. Jack, Lissa, and Buck all traveled to Transylvania to try and figure this thing out.
He thinks that Topaz is trying to communicate with him.
Correct.
Telepathically. So that's why he wanted to check it out.
Yep. The villagers are angry about the murders that have been going on. They go to Rusoff Manor, which is the old ancestral home, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to confront. I think they're going to try and confront the killers that are there, right?
All right. They when they get there, they see the townsfolk, like a demonstration saying, "Hey, these gypsies, and they're hanging out in Rusoff Manor. We're going to go up there and take care of them."
Right.
And Jack is thinking, "Hey, based on my dream, maybe Topaz is there. I better get there before they do."
Right. So Jack fights him off to begin with.
Right.
And then he sees this ghostly image of Topaz, and she says she's been captured.
Right.
And so in the countryside, Jack is the werewolf. He finds Topaz. She's locked in some type of cage on a wagon.
Right.
And she had been captured. He manages to set her free. And there's an older gypsy woman who seems to be in charge of the band or clan. And I realize that gypsy isn't necessarily a PC term today, but I'm just using it because that's the way it was used in the issue. Yeah. So just so everyone understands that. What she releases this huge bear who has these silver claws to attack the werewolf, right?
Yeah, that was the dream part that.
Correct. That he had imagined. Yeah, when he imagined this creature with that was metallic with silver, that's what he had kind of dreamed, or at least foreshadowed, however you want to call it. And there's a group of zombie gypsies, right?
Yep.
That emerge from the shadows. And one of them throws a silver knife at the werewolf, but he's shielded by that older, angry gypsy woman, right?
Yeah, Topaz manages to use her powers to sort of bring her back to reality and make her realize that what she's doing is wrong.
Correct.
And well, go ahead.
Yeah, her psi powers, and so this was interesting because as she was passing this older gypsy woman, she reveals that her name is Maria Rusoff, and she's actually Jack's grandmother. And she had done these things to avenge the gypsies that had been murdered, that she had taken up with, essentially.
Yeah, they took her in when she was ostracized by the village because she was
correct. Because she was behind the curse or associated with the curse. Yes.
Associated with the curse, even though she had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And the gypsies that she reanimated were those that were killed by the villagers.
Correct.
Through the familiar of Topaz. She couldn't do it on her own, but through Topaz, she had enough power to do that.
Right.
And she revealed, how it occurred. So she died a hero, even though, she was tormented by the deaths, the killing of her village, essentially.
Right.
So really sad story here, actually.
Yeah, a good story, though.
Very good story. Excellent story. To answer Tat, I think I finished my Werewolf by Night collection like 1985. Somewhere around there. So a long time ago, Tat, I've had these comics.
Southern Comic Geek, welcome, sir.
Hey, Jason.
Thank you on the congratulations. I appreciate it. All right, so next up is Werewolf 27.
27, yeah. Okay, so, oh boy. So, okay. So now Topaz is back in the fold. Maybe we should explain, right? She left to try to regain her powers because the encounter with Taboo, her like stepfather or whatever.
Yeah, familiar or stepfather, right?
Yeah, had taken a toll upon her. She used to be able to control the werewolf and have Jack's consciousness rise up into it, so that he couldn't talk, but he could sort of be conscious during the time that she was near him and could, separate.
Correct. Right. He could somewhat think, and if he couldn't think as Jack, his aggression could at least be controlled and targeted.
Right. Exactly.
With her psi powers. Right.
Right. So she is a great plot device, right? So, which I think Monk wanted to bring back here, right? So, and here we start perhaps the greatest Werewolf by Night villain, Dr. Glitter Knight. Because he's part of two big story arcs. This is the first one.
Yep.
So, they're back in California. They went back from Transylvania. And Jack is like, Topaz is trying to control Jack, but her powers are too weak. So Jack leaves as the werewolf, goes down the beach, and he looks up and he sees a light in this cavern. And of course, the coincidence of coincidences, in there is In there is Dr. Glitter Knight, and he is conjuring up stuff in there. And then he sees, like the Glitter Knight power and this egg thing, right? And what happened is that I don't know. I don't remember if it flashed back or flashed forward at this point, but Topaz went to Glitter Knight to restore her powers, right. And instead of doing that, he took part of her soul, and he created this.
Right, that was a flashback. Yeah, that had already happened.
Right. I guess some backstory there.
Yeah, and this is like a dark black egg. Yeah,
this black egg, right? And with that portion of her soul, she managed to escape. That's what's in that cavern with Glitter Knight. All right. So apparently, Glitter Knight went to California. At this point, we don't know why, but he's apparently looking for Taboo, right? Even though he's supposedly dead. Correct. So the werewolf goes in there. They start tussling. He breaks open the egg, that ebony egg thing. Mm-hmm. And this thing comes out of it, which is, Glitter Knight calls it the firstborn, but it's actually the creation from the ectoplasm of Topaz's dark soul, or part of her soul.
Right, dark portion of her soul. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and real quickly, he had worked with Taboo. So that's how Topaz knew of him. He was like a mentor of Taboo's way back in the day. So Topaz went to him to say, hey, can I bargain with you to try to get my powers back? And that's how she got roped into losing part of her soul. Yeah.
Right. She thought that because he was a mentor to Taboo, that he would obviously help her, but he obviously has other plans for society, shall we say. So he captures
Jack, Buck, and Topaz.
Jack, Buck, and Topaz, right? Exactly. And he ties into these stalagmite things, mm-hmm. Right? When Jack, at this point, Jack is human, right?
Right.
Because he went back down there, and then while he was going to, do his thing, shall we mm-hmm. say, with the souls of these beings, Jack becomes the werewolf again, starts fighting the soul beast, or whatever this thing is.
Right.
And during that fight, he breaks the stalagmite of Buck, and Buck frees Topaz, and they get away. And then Jack falls on top of this soul beast and manages to either hurt it or kill it. I forgot which one.
He killed it, yeah, and that released Topaz's soul.
Topaz's soul,
to escape, yeah.
Yeah, right. And I think that's where it ends.
Yeah, well, and Taboo claims that his enemy, or Dr. Glitter Knight claims that his enemy Taboo will still die, and he thinks that the werewolf is controlled by Taboo somehow.
Right. That's true. Yeah, that's true. And Topaz is like, well, what am I supposed to do? Taboo's dead, and he's telling me I need to get Taboo.
Right. You have 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, 2 weeks. Right. Exactly. So I was like.
But I think that's the next issue. I think that's 28.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, you're right, because that's where the bat demons come to pay them a visit.
So 28. That's and by the way, it's the same creative team throughout. Gil Kane with the cover art, Doug Mensch with the writing, Don Perlin with the interior art.
Yeah, it doesn't change for a while.
Right. So Lissa, which just for those of you know, it's listed because that's a nickname. It's a short for Melissa.
Melissa,
yeah.
Jack's sister.
Correct. That's his sister. She turns 18. So finally, and they're all kind of away I think they're at the castle. The one
Not
that
yet.
they
Not yet.
they're
They're at
not there yet.
Buxton
Okay.
first. Yeah.
But I think so they're attacked by Dr. Glitternight because he still wants to know where Taboo's at. And that's where he gives them the 2-week
warning,
ultimatum, right, to come up with an answer. And Topaz is like, the dude's dead. What are you talking about? But she has a dream where she sees Taboo in Rusoff Manor. That's what it is.
Correct.
Yeah. And so they head there to see if they can find Taboo's spirit or whatever this dream ultimately leads them to. And Dr. Glitternight has ultimately harvested Taboo's soul. So Taboo is dead, but Dr. Glitternight has harvested his soul, and he wanted Taboo's help to help do the same thing to everybody else on Earth. Right. And Taboo said, no, I'm not going to do that. He refused. And so that's how he became Dr. Glitternight's immortal enemy.
Immortal enemy, yeah.
Essentially, right.
Yeah, he fought him off at that point,
yep.
And, but he couldn't defeat him, so
right.
he just got away. Yeah.
Right, because number one, he's an apparition in a sense. He's just an escaped soul or an ectoplasm. And number two, Dr. Glitternight is very powerful.
Very powerful, yeah.
So Dr. Glitternight attacks, the moon is full, and Lissa is beginning to change. And so Topaz and Taboo's, we'll just call him Taboo. Topaz and Taboo are both trying to hold off Dr. Glitternight while it looks like Lissa's changing. And they're also trying to stop Lissa's transformation. But they can't do it. And ultimately, Dr. Glitternight uses his power to accelerate her transformation and uses his black magic to corrupt it and change Lissa into this monstrous version of a werewolf.
Yeah. A were-demon, I think they call it.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think at this point he's actually in control of the were-demon, but
he's not.
But because of the close proximity, of course, she attacks the everybody, and Jack Russell Werewolf, they fight and they start going up into the top of the castle. Yeah, okay, and I guess that's in 29 when the
correct. Yeah, that's in 29 when they start fighting.
Now the interesting thing about this is that the were-demon has like more powers than a normal werewolf.
Correct.
She has like these flame eyes, again, fire. Bill, right?
Yeah.
So while they're fighting up top there in the parapet, Taboo and Taboo and Topaz and Buck are trying to
battle Glitternight
down below in the castle tower. So there's two fronts of confrontations going on here.
Correct.
And Buck manages, believe it or not, to throw a sheet over Glitternight and throw him against a wall and knock him out.
He tackles him, yeah.
Yeah. And
knocks
he does
him
like,
out.
I'll do the old football move.
Yep.
Anyway, he's very powerful, but apparently,
hey, sometimes it's the simplest thing that works.
Right. The old physical attack worked there.
Yeah.
Okay, but while so they're going up to find out what's up with, what's going on with the Jack and Lisa werewolf, and they're fighting tooth and nail. I mean, they're clawing, they're slashing, they're throwing, and now they're all the way at the top.
Yep.
Of the castle, the edge there of the tower. And when the Lisa werewolf sees Buck and Topaz, she's going towards them. She's tackled by the Jack Russell werewolf, and they tumble down. They hit this cornices, and they fall to the ground. Jack gets up and takes off.
Yeah. Lissa takes the brunt of the fall.
Lissa takes the brunt. Yeah, she takes a hard hit on that thing.
Yeah.
And then after that, Buck and Topaz get Lisa and they bring her into the manner. They tie up Glitter Knight,
Mm-hmm.
and then
that'll
Jack
hold
comes
them.
back in the morning, right?
Because,
Lisa. Lisa. Yeah, Lisa believes that it
Lissa's
was all a
unconscious.
dream.
She regains consciousness, but then she thinks it was
yeah.
all a dream.
Right. She regains consciousness after the full moon is down, and she thinks it's all a dream. She's like, "Oh, thank God, it was all a dream." And they're like,
correct, right? Yep. Not so fast.
I ain't gonna tell her.
Yeah, me either. All right, number 30. They try to get.
Look at that skull and the moon.
I love it. Yep. Yeah, that's such a great cover.
Great cover there. Fabulous.
Some of Gil Kane's finest work on some of these covers.
I'm so glad that he did the covers because the interior art, okay.
It's all right. I think Perlin did it. He did a sufficient job.
A serviceable job, I would say.
Yes. Sometimes he went above and beyond, but more often than not, he just didn't get in the way of the progression of the story.
Yeah, he's a pretty good storyteller, but his faces lack a lot of detail.
Right. So they try to get Dr. Glitter Knight to reverse Lissa's demon werewolf form, to reverse the curse. He's like, nope, not going to do it.
Nope. They rough him up a bit, but
exactly. He's their prisoner, but he uses his magic to escape. It wasn't very difficult for him.
He was playing possum probably.
Exactly, the whole time. Yeah. He transforms Lissa yet again. He steals her soul, and this is what you were referring to before. He uses her soul as a leash to enslave her, to keep her, to keep a hold of her and have her do his bidding and have her attack Jack and whomever he wants to. So of course, Lissa as the were-demon and Jack as the werewolf fight again. And they're fighting savagely, but then at this point, which is a really good part of the story, Taboo makes a noble sacrifice, and he sacrifices his soul by giving it to Lissa, which essentially cures her both of the lycanthropy and of any ill effects from the black magic of Dr. Glitter Knight. Dr. Glitter Knight is escaping. He can levitate. He can fly, levitate. So he's escaping. But right before he does, the werewolf grabs onto him and he's clawing up to him. And so Dr. Glitter Knight has this light in the center of his chest that he emanates, which is can be deadly, but it can do lots of things like transform people into different things. It can project things, but it can burn things. It can do all sorts of different things, sap energy. And the werewolf hangs on to him, and they're kind of battling in the air as they're going higher and higher and higher. And the werewolf slashes and gets him right there where that light, that source of power is, and slashes him, and it releases his black soul, causing him to explode and, I guess, die forever. And the werewolf falls down, I think, into the water or something like that.
He explodes and falls into the water. Yeah, it was very convincing, Bill. Very convincing.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I thought that it was interesting that they found a way to save Lissa from lycanthropy, but Jack is still on the outs because
correct.
It would take Glitter Knight to make another simulacrum from a dead soul that would sacrifice himself, which will come up later, by the way.
Absolutely.
Anyway. Okay. So let me this
I think Giant Size 4 is next.
Oh, Giant Size 4. Okay, I'm sorry. Giant Size 4. Oh yeah. That's the Morbius story. Yeah,
that was a fun one.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
This is one, Virgil Redondo was the
right.
What was the interior artist for this one?
You're right, Virgil Redondo. I wonder if he's kin to Hector Redondo.
I don't know,
because
I think he's Mr. and Mrs. Redondo's little boy.
You're such a jokester. You're such a jokester. You know that. Yeah. Well, anyway. This is actually if you're a Morbius fan, it ties into his Adventure into Fear series as well. Because he's the I think her name is Martine, returns in this issue.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how to pronounce her name actually.
Is it Mart? Let me see what I have here. Is this the one with two stories in it, or is that the 5?
No, this one has 2 stories in it, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, so there's the one with the movie.
Actually, no, you're thinking of 5, aren't you?
Am I?
Or this does have 2 stories.
Hold on,
this is the one about the movie, right?
Yeah, this has 2.
Okay, yeah.
Which one do you want? You want the movie? Or you want the Morbius?
We'll do the movie.
You'll do the movie. Okay. All right. So, okay. You want take the movie first, and while I look at my notes here. All right.
Yeah. So Buck sells a movie script to the studio, to a stunt coordinator that works at the studio. Remember, Clary she's an actress. She works at this studio, so Jack's familiar with it. And Buck went and took her to work because she needed a ride, and he ends up selling a script to the stunt coordinator, Brad Rangel, who says, hey, yeah, I've saved us some money. I want to make my own movie. He's like, great. Clary's going to star in the movie. Jack will be a stuntman. Very reminiscent, by the way, of Ghost Rider along those lines, too.
Very reminiscent.
Remember, very strong shades of that.
Yes, I agree.
But it's good. The remote shooting location, Jack's like, hey, that'll keep me kind of away from people because it's getting to be that time of the month. And he means it a little bit differently than we've typically heard that. But it'll keep me away from population centers so I can't do any damage to them or myself or what have you kind of thing. So he's like, that works out perfectly. And at the very least, it'll be an adventure weekend getaway. So they're all on board. It's called Serenity Springs, and it's deserted when they get there. Just a few people that seem to be walking around in a daze, right? Yep. And I think it was Buck's like, hey, where's the diner here? They're like, we don't have a need for food. And the guy just keeps walking. He's like, wow, you got some weirdos here. But at any rate, he's like, fine, we got our own power generators, so we don't need anything from them other than like this, the location is a set. So right. They're setting up where Jack's going to swing on a rope, and this guy's going to shoot a blank, right? And Jack's going to pretend to have gone over the edge of this cliff. So Jack does his swing, and the other actor shoots the rifle. But it's not a blank, it's a real bullet. And it severs the rope. And Jack goes over the edge of this cliff. And so theoretically, either a big mistake happened, or it was a designed plan to murder Jack Russell. But at any rate, he falls into the river below. He becomes the werewolf, and he runs off and roams around the forest. And during his forest adventures, he finds a cave that has a skeleton in it with what seem to be tentacle growths on the ribs of it.
On the chest, yeah.
Yeah. So important to remember, because the film crew is now missing. Buck and Clary are searching for them and Jack. They don't know where anybody went. They find a dying member of the crew, and there's something that's coming out of his chest. But when they're talking to him and they're seeing this, they both get knocked out. Jack goes back to the town, and he can't find anybody. But he does find a trail of slime in the town. So he's following this, and he follows it to that cave.
Right.
The one that he'd seen as a werewolf. He sees Buck and Clary hung by their ankles above a pit. Jack's then knocked out. Right? Of course. And he is now hanging with Buck and Clary, because what's better than 2 folks hanging by their ankles? 3. So they're all there. The crew is they are in these ritualistic robes. They're performing some sort of ceremony that's going to sacrifice everyone to an ancient deity. The whole film thing was a ruse to get everybody there. And Jack transforms into the werewolf. He escapes. He attacks the cult and they attack him with their chest tentacles. These tentacles bursting out of their chests. Buck manages to get free, and he releases Clary. And these giant tentacles from the pit, which is this ancient deity, this malevolent deity, it wants to sacrifice one way or the other, right? And so it reaches up and grabs Brad Wrangle, the leader of this cult, and pulls him in as the whole cave collapses on the rest of the cult right after Jack and company escape.
Yeah. Yeah, that story there was so preposterous, but
yeah,
one of those. Like,
but it was a fun preposterous one.
No, agreed. Yeah. Very Lovecraftian.
Yeah, absolutely. Cthulhu, right? Yeah.
But I was like, this is. I mean, even in comic book world, this is like so much coincidence here.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, you get a script, you'll read it right away. You got the crew, you got the act. Yeah, that's no problem.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted to take it before he even looked at one page.
Looked at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, okay.
Yep.
All right. That's so on this one here, the Morbius one, another really neat blood red cover there. Like Kane. So of course, you meet Frankenstein, you're gonna meet Dracula, which he did when their previous retrospective. Correct. Then of course you're gonna meet Morbius. I don't think he meant Man-Thing. I think that was missing.
Oh, he pulled a Baldwin on Jack Russell. Too soon, Lord Tatman. Too soon.
Oh boy, yeah. Oof. Well, anyway, so Morbius is looking. He's up on the rooftops. He's looking for Martine, his old girlfriend, fiance, I think, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And he sees her walking around the streets there, just kind of in a daze, kind of like just in a malaise kind of thing. Right. And she's just like barely speaking. She's not being coherent or anything. So he's like just trying to convince her, hey, I'm Michael. Remember, remember my lab. Remember, when we were dating. Remember, the times, that we went out and all this stuff. And eventually, by the way, Jack is previously turned into a werewolf, and he had been tussling with these guys outside of a bar that were making, fun of him or whatever. I didn't realize that he was a werewolf. And then while Morbius is trying to convince Martine that, that, hey, come back to luck, come back to me. Of course, Jack Russell comes by. They start tussling. Morbius actually knocks him unconscious, and he starts to drink his blood. Where the Jack Russell's blood, and it's actually, he's gonna like drain him. And Martine says, hey, if you want to regain your humanity, you can't be doing things like that. You can't, you got to leave him alone. You got to leave him alive, So they go, and,
well, he transformed.
At night,
he transformed.
He went back to Jack Russell. Right.
Right.
To Jack Russell.
Yep.
So Martine and Morbius leave. And at night, during the day, I guess Morbius gets a little weaker. So they hole up for the night. And was her name Martine? I'm calling her this, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it was.
Okay. She finds a key in her pocket, right? That she, that when Morbius wakes up the next evening, I guess, they figure out that it's a post office box.
Yep.
Right. And that apparently it has something to do with a cure for Morbius affliction, or
that's right. Yep. Right. He thinks it could be right.
Right. Because of I guess in Adventure into Fear, there was a subplot where that occurred. Right. So Jack is taken to a hospital because he's been drained of, not
Right.
drained, but low in blood or whatever. And of course, when he's there, he wakes up right before the full moon again. Bill turns into the werewolf, thrashes another nurse, and hops out. Right.
Yep.
And Morbius goes to the post office box. Of course, it's closed, so he breaks in there to the post office with Martine, and he finds this paper with a very complex formula. So complex that even he doesn't really understand it, but he can tell by certain of the actual way that it's written, the actual chemicals and all that, that it could be a cure.
Correct.
So he's like all happy. He's like, yeah, we have to go. I have to do more research, but I think that this has possibilities. So while they're going to a place so they can, figure it out, of course, Jack Russell, remembering what happened, comes across him at the La Brea tar pits.
Yep.
Right. Very important part there. Right.
Yep.
So they're fighting at the La Brea tar pits. It has that walkway above the La Brea tar pits. Exactly that. That's huge tar, supposedly from millions of years ago. Then bones from dinosaurs periodically appear from that mire. So they're fighting, and Morbius has the formula in his chest, his vest there. And of course, he gets slashed by the werewolf, and the paper flies away, and Morbius is trying to get at it, and he jumps, and of course, he gets accosted by the werewolf, and it falls into the tar pit. The werewolf, throws Morbius down there, but at that point, Morbius grabs like a piece of dinosaur bone and just pummels him to the point where he's about to die. Again, Martine goes, hey, listen, if you want to regain your humanity, you have to start by acting human.
Yeah.
But he's like, but now the formula's gone. And she's like, that's no excuse. The werewolf is thrown down there, and when he gets up, you see the print of his foot on the formula.
Yeah.
So it didn't go into the tar pit. Actually, it was like right by it. But Morbius was so despondent that he didn't even look. And that's where it ends. Really sad, like that close.
Yeah. Good story, though.
Yeah, good story. Oh, what's next?
29, right?
No, 31.
Oh, 31 is next.
31. Okay. Buttons. Remember Buttons?
Oh, I do remember Buttons, yes. Gosh, what was Buttons? Buttons was the daughter of Elaine, right?
Right, correct.
Yeah, so Jack and Topaz, they want to break, right? Just to break from everything that's been going on. So they decide to go on a ski trip with Buck and Buck's new lady interest, Elaine, and her daughter, 7-year-old daughter, Buttons. Buck takes Jack to the woods because, of course, it's going to be the first night, right? And so he says, all right, Jack says, oh, you know what? I got to head back for work. Sorry. I can't enjoy the rest of it, but he's been playing with Buttons and Topaz and hanging out in the snow all day and stuff.
Snowball fights and all that.
Exactly. Yeah. But they say, all right, I'm going to go drop Jack off back home for work. But he actually leaves him out in the woods. So he's away from everybody and won't hurt anybody. Perfect plan.
Because of the weather, they're closing the far reaches of the ski lift.
Right. So there's a blizzard moving in.
Moving in, right. Mm-hmm. They figure, well, that's, you may be cold, but you'll be all right,
Right. And so good plan, but it doesn't necessarily work out because when Buck gets back to the ski lodge, he discovers that Buttons has wandered off. And they're organizing a search party to help find her because the blizzard has set in too, of course. So it makes it that much more difficult to search for because of visibility and everything else. So Buck says, she wandered off into the area where I released Jack. or where I dropped off Jack. And so he takes one of their vehicles, their snowmobile vehicles, and goes off on his own. And I crazy son of a gun. Now we got to look for him too.
Yeah, now we got to look for him too.
Yeah, they go after him, and they're searching for her while he's heading to the area where he left Jack. And right then, right as he kind of gets there, Jack is moving in as the werewolf on buttons. And so Buck intervenes, and he and the werewolf sort of fight, but it's more like the werewolf just repeatedly slashing the hell out of him.
Just beating the heck out of him.
And Buck says, well, this is it. If you want to get to her, you got to get to me. And he kind of falls over her and covers her up. And the werewolf slashes him a couple more times before realizing he's not getting much reaction. And so he kind of loses interest and runs off.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And Buttons is like under him.
Correct. So she's pinned under him.
She's pinned under him. So he's like, he's just like, he's got disinterested because nothing was moving, you know?
Yep.
Comic
Cat Collectibles, how are you? Thanks for stopping by.
So the search party finally finds them. So Buttons, scared to death, but she's like,
safe,
Uncle Buck, but he's
Buck's
mortally
in bad
wounded.
State.
Yeah, in fact they intimate that he could be dead, but
correct.
When the crew finds him, apparently they think there's possibility he's alive, so that they take him to a hospital, but he's in bad ripped to shreds essentially. Really good story, by the way.
It is very good story.
And I think Monk here was sort of, hey, let's do some kind of interlude with a very different kind of vibe, because it starts off, hey, all this pressure, all these things that we're going to, it makes sense, right? Let's go and sort of blow off some steam, and then this tragedy occurs. And of course, Buck, who has been his friend and loyal confidant for he's been beat up by that werewolf 20 times, and he finally finds somebody, he's like a 40-some-year-old, finally finds somebody, have some R&R with, and very bravely protects this girl who would have been mauled to death by the werewolf.
Yeah, I love that issue for a lot of reasons, because number one, it's true to the original kind of spirit of the title, and that he's an out of control beast and bad things happen when he transforms. And it also takes some real risk with someone who up to that point in time was an integral character throughout the series, and that's Buck. And it takes some risks with that, and actually, well, we'll see kind of going forward how it transforms things. So I thought that was a pivotal transformative issue. Actually,
agree. There are consequences. I mean, there's only so many bullets you can evade before you get burnt, and this one hurt. I mean, it was a shock, and Jack, of course, is going to be just gutted by this,
right?
Which we're going to find out here in a minute, because everybody knows this issue now.
Well, I think 5 actually.
5 is next.
Is next, yeah.
Okay. You want to take this one? I don't have a good recollection of this one.
Yeah, I have somewhat of a recollection of this.
I know that he was pulled into that other dimension and all that, but
Young Montano.
Young Montano
is I believe is the
sure is. You're 100% correct, my friend.
Yeah, because there are so few other than Don Perlin.
Yeah.
So there's this. Buck and Jack visit this Satanist named Joaquin. I'm guessing it's like Zaire, or it could be Zaire. Because they want to know if maybe he has a cure for lycanthropy. Buck keeps pulling Jack into a lot of these things, by the way. But at any rate, Buck's acting like he's interviewing him, and Jack's supposed to be a photographer. That's kind of like their front. He sees right through this. And he knows that Jack is a werewolf. But ultimately, they head out later on Joaquin runs into him, catches up with him on the road, and takes them prisoner.
Yep.
He wants to sacrifice them to Satan. After all, he is a Satanist. That's generally what Satanists do.
That's what they do.
Yeah. Shouldn't be anything groundbreaking there, any alarm bells going off or anything. That's
apparently
pretty
a werewolf is like a high-end sacrifice.
Absolutely. That's not like just, you'll get some extra kudos.
Not some, blue collar, guy.
That's right.
This is a,
that's a premium sacrifice. Yep. So, but during this process, I think through this like pit, but it's actually like a portal. The werewolf is actually, Jack is the werewolf. He's actually captured by a wizard from another dimension named Grithstone. Grithstain. There we go. Grithstain. Yeah. Grithstain. And there's this black kind of creature named Pangloss. There he is.
Yeah.
Who wants the werewolf for the Half Queen's Fantasy Creature Collection in Biphasia, which is the dimensional world in which they exist. Biphasia is half day, half of its day, and half of its night at all times. And
right.
The queen used to sit on a throne right between the two to kind of balance the light and the night.
Literally, the throne is cut in half where the wall is light and dark. Yeah.
Correct. Pangloss loves her because she stood up for him, way back when. But they don't reveal that at the time. But Grithstain casts a loyalty spell on the werewolf. So he would stop fighting Pangloss, first of all. And he would help defeat the, I think the Dark Pawns or something like that, that they ultimately want to fight. So the queen, I think that they go back, and unfortunately in the light, the werewolf will never transform. So he can never be this fantasy creature for her anyways.
Right.
But the dark forces with the Dark Pawns, they decide that they're going to attack and try to take over Biphasia. And so Pangloss and the werewolf, I guess later on Grithstain joins them, but it's just those two right now because Grithstain missed the speeder that took away with him. It took away before he got in. But anyway, they fight and defeat these Dark Pawn creatures and foil the plots to take over Biphasia. They realize that the queen has to, again, sit back on her throne to balance those two sides. And they can't be together.
They can never be together. Yeah.
Correct. Jack ultimately returns. He's returned by Grithstain. And he helps Buck fight the Satanists. And they defeat Joaquin and the Satanists. But Jack ultimately doesn't tell Buck anything about his adventure. It's almost like everything that occurred was a split second in Buck's time, in our time, before Jack was returned by Grithstain. And so Buck had no idea any of that happened. It was all seamless to him. And Jack just kind of kept it to himself, figured it'd probably be better that way.
Yeah. Really kind of an odd duck of a story here.
Yeah. Fun, but definitely no attempts to keep that in continuity with anything else that was going on. Yeah, it was definitely a dalliance, if you will.
Yes, correct. I think it was a bit indulgent. I think he wanted to put like some fantasy elements. Kind of had that, that Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing with another kingdom and the political infighting and the fact that the queen really was only interested in having her menagerie of wonders.
Right.
Not even caring that, they were about to be invaded and she had to be convinced.
Yeah.
It was an odd duck of a story. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. But it had its merits.
Yeah. Damien said almost like a Conan story, fantasy adventure.
Yes. Yeah. Correct.
Had strong elements of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Just a really odd kind of thing. But, once I started remembering when you were talking about it and I was like, it almost read like one of those kid kind of fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
in a sense.
Yeah, yeah, it did. It definitely had fairy tale feeling elements to it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe like you said, maybe that was kind of an experimentation.
Could have been.
Trying to take, because that's the thing with this series, that it goes into so many directions. When you know, later on went to superhero, went to horror, kind of murder mystery.
I'll interject real quickly because I know we still got a lot to get through.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the reasons I say that the Buttons issue was seminal in the series is because I think at that point, Doug Mensch realized that sometimes I'm going to have to play for keeps with this formula. He's a beast, a werewolf that attacks and possibly kills people. And that does have lasting effects, repercussions. Yeah. And if I can't pivot away from that, I'm going to run out of scenarios in which he does this without having these permanent repercussions affecting the people around him. Something's got to give. And so I think he was looking for different ways to kind of pivot the series into a different direction that allowed him a little bit more freedom along those lines.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. It was very, the series had a very heavy, serious tone to it.
Did.
And because
which I loved. And the writing was just amazing. Yes.
And because there was a month in between the action, you know, it's not an easy series to write, because to keep everything coherent and a timeline, and it was a lot of characters, a lot of subplots, a lot of things that were pulled in from those characters that affected the central character.
Right.
You know, he did a pretty good job of keeping all that straight. Now we'll talk at the end, you know, how well overall it ended up, but as far as that goes, it's not an easy series to write. That's for
correct.
Sure.
Yep.
All right. So let's get to this one, which everybody knows now.
I can't remember. What issue number is that one?
What is that?
32.
32.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everyone lusts after that comic book.
Right.
No doubt about it.
When I bought it out of a dollar bin, nobody lusted out after it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway.
That was a long time ago, though.
Long time ago. 1980, 83, 84, something like that.
Because it's been hot for a long time now.
Right. But you know, when I tell you nobody wanted this, anyway, I'm not going to get into that. That's not the purview of this show.
Hey, you're just lucky you got it. Good for you.
Yeah, I read it. So you know, I mean, it's probably like a good, very good. So I have no problem reading it. So it opens up on the second night of his turning into a werewolf, and he's fighting already Moon Knight, right? Which at this point we don't.
How are you? Welcome.
Hey, welcome. Which we have no idea who this guy is at this point. But he has silver weapons. He has a silver spiked glove.
Yeah.
He has silver crescent darts.
Yeah.
He has a silver truncheon.
Yeah.
And so he is, I mean, wailing.
Silver boots.
His
silver
toe,
boots. Yeah.
His toe is silver.
Yeah.
So he is just, and he is obviously highly skilled and savant in martial arts, in hand-to-hand combat, and weapons, everything. So he is just trouncing the werewolf, right? And to the point where, you know, he's in so much pain. Then Jack goes back and starts to ponder how he got there, right?
Right.
And what after the 31 with Buttons and all that, he found out about what he did to Buck, and he smashed his hand to a wall just rage because he's so upset.
Right. Probably ended up breaking his hand. Yeah.
Because you can see during the battle scene he's not really using that hand as the werewolf, right?
Right. And bring everyone up, Roger. So Buck is like in a coma.
He's in a coma, right? In the hospital in a coma. That's correct.
Yeah.
Right. And Jack didn't remember exactly what happened. So when he showed up, I think it was at his father's house. He was like, "Haven't you heard what happened?" You know, and then so he.
Well, because I mean, Jack was waiting the next day. He's like,
"Next day,
okay, Buck, you got to pick me up," and he never came. Yeah.
So he had to hitchhike with this really odd dude.
Yep.
And that got him into town, right? So, so what? So he went to see in the hospital. You know, Lisa is there and everybody, and Topaz, and as well as Elaine and Buttons was there as well. But so we learn, you know, that who the origin of the Moon Knight, at least in this issue. Moon Knight went to see Jack because he was hired by the committee and paid $10,000 to bring him in.
That's good scratch. That's big money.
Big money back in 1975.
Yeah.
76.
But yeah, this is after he came back from the hospital, back to his dad's house. That's when he saw Moon Knight. Yeah.
Right. So his dad like attacks, not attacks, but sort of tries to keep Moon Knight away.
Run interference so Jack could get away.
Right. And Jack gets away. And of course, during that time, he again turns into the werewolf.
Right.
But the committee is the one that gave him his costume, hired him, supplied him with weapons and all that. And also he has he has a helicopter pilot named Frenchie with a helicopter. And that's how he gets around. And while this is going on, Frenchie actually went and kidnapped Lisa and Topaz, I do believe.
Correct. Yep.
Right? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So now we're back, and he's still fighting the, you know, this was all like a flashback, right?
Right.
So now he's back fighting the werewolf again, and he's just pelted with those crescent darts, so he's in a lot of pain.
Oh yeah, right? He's getting it handed to him.
Oh man, he's just getting nailed, right?
Moon Knight can fight, yeah.
Yeah, and then finally, he hits him with that truncheon and the boot and knocks him out. Calls Frenchie over, just drapes him over the ladder that drapes from the copter.
Yeah. And
the cops are there, so they're starting to shoot. He's like, "Hey, just get out of the range," you know, of the Northrop and his gang of the cops.
Well, just his gang, because Northrop's already, I think, going to Haiti, right?
Oh, that's right. That's right. Just his gang. Yeah, just the cops, right. Northrop, that's right. And here we learn that Northrop is after Coker, and he found out from Sandy that he went to Haiti.
Correct, right.
So he went to Haiti after Coker.
Right, on vacation. So in an unofficial capacity, right.
Yeah, he's not obviously it's not in his jurisdiction because not in the United States, right? And but obviously Coker's no longer a werewolf, but he shows up at the hut of this very old looking lady,
Gisela of the 1,000 years.
Gisela of the 1,000 years. She looks about 1,000 years old.
She does, doesn't she?
Yeah. And I think he tells her, "Hey, you're here because you're still cursed or something or other. You came to see me for something."
Yeah.
And I think there is where it stops.
Yep. All right, 33, second appearance of Moon Knight.
Yeah.
Also a big book. So the chopper, the helicopter gets away from the police officers. Then it shows in Haiti. Coker tells Gisela that he used to be a werewolf, but he's been cured of that. However, his aunt and uncle suddenly died. And so he's come back to Haiti to figure that out. He spoke to his cousin, his little cousin, Benita. And she said that Papa Geronda, who is like his great-grandfather, actually killed her mother and father. He's like, how can this be? He's been dead for, 30 years.
Yeah.
And he was referred to by Gisela to Jericho Drum. Boom, boom, boom. A certain brother of voodoo. And so that's kind of where it's cool because it's kind of doing the duality of the two locations, kind of advancing the story a little bit in each one before, the two theoretically would meet at some point in the future, right? That's kind of how that works. So the werewolf comes back to consciousness in the helicopter, starts battling Moon Knight again. They both fall into the ocean. They're on the dock, they're fighting. And the werewolf transforms into Jack, and he gets knocked out. Otherwise, he was giving Moon Knight everything he could handle and then some. So Jack, Lissa, and Topaz are all brought in to the committee. And then in a third area, they go back to the hospital where Elaine and Buttons are kind of hanging out, and they learn that Buck may be paralyzed.
Yeah.
So not good news, but he did make it through the surgery. He is in a coma, but unfortunately, he may be paralyzed as well. Back to the committee. Moon Knight gets his money, his 10,000 scratch, and Jack is caged up in a cage. And Jack's
well, they actually withheld the money because they weren't sure.
Right, they want to see him transform. Yeah, they want to make sure he was. Yeah,
right.
But he's in a cage, and the committee says they're going to use him to eliminate their rivals. Use him in his werewolf form. That's why they wanted him. Moon Knight regrets taking the job, doesn't feel good about it, especially when Jack's talking to him about it, like, hey, this isn't right kind of thing. But he frees the werewolf, and they both attack the committee. Moon Knight frees Lissa and Topaz, and Moon Knight takes off because once Jack's done with the committee, he wants another piece of Moon Knight. And so Moon Knight's not, no. That's not going to happen. I'm
not getting paid for that, so I'm out of here.
Yep. And I think that's where that one's done.
Yeah. But he does that the leader of the committee, the werewolf, catches up to him, and
yep, he does.
Yeah.
He had it coming.
Yeah. And then he just takes off. Yeah. He was a piece of work, that's for sure.
He was.
Yeah, he was a piece of work.
Now, let me take a brief hiatus here. I thought that was a really good issue.
Agreed.
I thought that the series in total was really well written up until
this point.
Yeah. I really think that the arc, starting with 34 and ending, I think, in 37, maybe, might have been 38. It was like a 4 or 5 issue arc. I thought it was just not very good. I thought the whole premise was so shaky. But I think from that point forward, there were some things that they tried to do in order to save the series that I think took it so far away from the original intention of the series that it's kind of like it's kind of like being a peace-loving people who are fighting murderers, then turning into murderers to save yourself. That's kind of what it feels like, right?
Yeah.
All right. So the next one is 34.
34, right? So, yeah, maybe we can speed through these a bit, Bill.
Yeah.
It seems to me like we were talking about how he's trying to make different types of stories here, and it seems to me like they wanted to make something so that they could create a haunted atmosphere. They already have a horror atmosphere,
right?
But here, this kind of like, it's like Poltergeist or those 50s and 60s haunted house movies where you're not sure if it's supernatural or if it's your psychoses or what is going on, right? Okay, but it turns out that Elaine's husband was a paranormal
researcher. Yeah,
a researcher, right? Correct.
Yeah.
Researcher.
Paranormal investigator.
Right. And this one house, I forgot what the name it was, but it was by
Marcosa House.
Marcosa House by Belleric Marcosa. Right.
Yep.
Right. Has like the most, extra dimensional energy and haunting things and all that. Right. And Buck, in his delusion, had mentioned it, right? So
I kind of whispered, "Only hope, Marcosa House."
Only hope, Marcosa, yeah. Right.
And that's the premise that is so redonkulous to me. It's like a physical ailment is somehow only curable through some supernatural. It just feels like Mensch was just pounding in this so he could get this story out of his system.
Agreed. It didn't make any sense as to why this had anything to do with it.
Correct.
Right? I mean, they did sort of bring him in to it, but this was never mentioned. If he hadn't been attacked by the werewolf, this would not have happened.
Right.
You know? So anyway, Lissa, Topaz, Elaine, and Jack go to this house, this mansion, this old beat up place, right?
Right.
And again, we don't know it, but this, Elaine's husband and a lot of the researchers had disappeared while investigating it. And they thought, they were dead because they just vanished, right? And when they get there, there's a gargoyle over the doorway, which is real creepy. Mm-hmm. And they have a trouble getting in. Then they finally get in, and the door closes. They can't get out.
Right.
And Topaz starts having these headaches and like being attacked by the shadow throat on her throat.
Right.
So all kinds of.
She's psionic, so she's very susceptible to any of. She's the most valuable commodity in fighting whatever's in the house, but she's also the most vulnerable to the evil in the house.
Correct. Absolutely correct. So she's taken out early, and not dead, but she's out for the count, right?
Right.
And you see like the car that they left out in front starts sinking into this bog or something.
Yeah, this old man, who was it, Selwyn?
Yeah.
He's the one. Yeah, he offered Elaine, her husband, and their research team $200,000 if they could find out the secrets behind this, because he wanted to extend his life.
Right. And he's like really old.
Exactly.
Really old.
And so he offered this group the same deal that he gave them, and that was his car that brought them to the house that kind of sunk into the ground.
It sunk into the ground. And they didn't. It was like I think they said it was a limousine, but they didn't have a chauffeur. They had to drive themselves. Yeah, apparently nobody was brave enough to go down there.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
Yeah. So, and he explains that if they find it, they get that money and all that stuff. So he funds this expedition and allows them to go down there. So again, all this is happening. Finally, Topaz wakes up and she's like, her head hurts. There's evil entities here. And then Elaine sees her husband, or a manifestation of her husband there.
Right, because she's already told that her husband and the rest of the research team, aside from Elaine, all perished at this house previously. The cops found Elaine crawling around outside.
Yeah, she was found. Yeah, exactly. She was the only one who survived that. Right. I think maybe one other, but so he's like warning her, "Hey, I sent you out of here. What are you doing back here?
Right.
You have to get out of here. This place is evil. It's like, I think he calls it like a hell on earth or something. I forgot what he called it. But everybody thinks that this is another kind of mind game, that this a hallucination or whatever.
Right.
And again, they're not totally sure what's going on here. Right.
Correct.
And then after that encounter, Jack starts turning back into the werewolf, and they find in the wall this skeleton. Stephen, her husband, when she goes to grab him, he turns into this horrible, like, just skeleton,
zombie skeleton, right?
Yeah, and that he fights with the werewolf, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah. So, and then he chops the head off of Stephen's skeleton, but it still keeps going. I mean, until finally, he just explodes. The head just explodes out, and Jack turns back into normal Jack Russell. Again, all kinds of weird things are going on here that kind of defy.
Isn't in this issue where Jack battles his own werewolf self?
Yeah, I think that's later on. Yeah,
it's like some peasant.
Yes, there's a peasant that comes out later, talks to him. That's right. I don't think it's in this issue though, because this is the one where they tried to do that seance. That's right. They do the seance, and that's when they talk to the peasant.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. and he explains that he is the one that actually has the werewolf soul.
Correct.
Right. But again, they can't trust anything here because
right.
They don't know. They're not.
They don't
sure
know what's illusory and what's real. Right.
Right. They just don't know. It's really that kind of haunted house story, you know, where are you dreaming this or is this real? Right. Because some of them experience it, others don't. Okay. So now I think Lisa and Jack go to sleep, and Jack has this dream about this creature that's attacking him, and he says something like, you know, this is real. But then again, when Elaine comes in to get him, he's not there. It just vanished.
Right.
Okay. So then Topaz gets a notion that there's some kind of somebody in the basement or the dungeon, and that's where they hack on the wall and they find that skeleton with no head.
Right.
Okay. And he's chained up. Right. So they're thinking, why do you have to behead somebody if they're chained up?
Right.
You know, and encase them into a wall. Well, that we're going to find out later. And then that peasant shows up, and that's where he becomes the werewolf, and they start to fight here. So it's again, it's very muddled. It's not tightly written. It's kind of like everywhere.
Yeah.
So I knew it when I read this issue. I was like,
definitely scattershot. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jack fights the werewolf. The peasant tells Jack about a key to defeating Marcosa is smashing that gargoyle.
Yeah. This was the issue, by the way. I'm sorry I wasn't showing it because I had my notes kind of on the side there.
Right. No problem.
Yeah. There you go.
Everyone's continuing to act crazy. You get like Elaine trying to kill Topaz. Alyssa's being hung in her bedroom by nobody. And then he looks, and then it's Philip, and then he's not there. And so it's just a bunch of painful but seemingly illusions that seem to cause pain. So it's hard to tell what's real and what isn't. Marcosa ultimately, I think in issue 35, tries to hang Buck, who seems to arrive at the house, and he's being hung, and you actually see Marcosa now, who is behind him. And I'll just try to run through this arc so we can work through it. But I think with issue 36, it's bi-monthly now, so they're definitely experiencing some sales issues.
Yes.
At this point. Can't tell if Buck is real or he's a ghost, right? I think Jack thinks he's a ghost, but then ultimately Buck convinces him that, yeah, it's me, it's Buck. And when you released me from the rope and I fell, I broke my leg. So Jack is the werewolf, but he can think and he can speak. So that's one of the keys in this as well. I ostensibly, because of the dark magic in the house, that allows him to think and speak as the werewolf. But Topaz fights with the werewolf. Topaz is thought to be dead. She's actually alive. The skull that they found, that they use that in a seance that Topaz leads. Elaine ends up attacking Topaz and Jack with a knife. The peasant and there's a whole host of lost souls in that house.
Whole host, yeah, correct.
They stand up to Marcosa. And while they're doing this, on this table, our little group falls through the floor down to the basement or down to the cellar, right? And that's where they see the skeleton that's headless, and they join the head to the skeleton. And it becomes a reanimation of that peasant. They're like, wait a minute, this can't be you. He's like, well, yeah, I tricked you. I was the one. Marcosa took my wife, and they go through this whole backstory of Marcosa, how we get all the rich people there, and they'd be strung out on drugs, and he would have them malnourished, and they would attack each other, and he would delight in their destruction and all this stuff. And his wife the peasant's wife got caught up in that, and he went to seek vengeance, but he wasn't able to. Marcosa caught him, and he was the one that beheaded him.
Correct.
And so this guy's saying, hey, only by destroying Marcosa's mortal remains, that's how we can defeat him. And so when they're going into this one door, Jack, as the werewolf opens it up, it's Marcosa's soul, which is a whole bunch of tentacles and everything, and he fights it off and slashes it, but closes the door and says, well, that's not going to work. And they hear some sirens. They're like, okay, the cops are coming. But they were actually zombie cops that were sent by Marcosa. And when he, at the end of this issue, when he's talking to Buck, he realizes as Buck transforms into Marcosa really isn't there.
Oh, man.
So 37, which is the third appearance of Moon Knight. The werewolf.
Or the simulacra of Moon Knight that came out of Marcosa's dark soul.
Correct. Yep.
He also with Glitter Knight. His enemies. Yeah, Glitter Knight and Hangman too. But they don't talk, and that sort of tells you that they're not really there. Yeah.
But the zombie and werewolf, the zombie cops are defeated by Topaz and the werewolf. Marcosa. What else we got? All right, just making sure no one else entering the stream. We got Marcosa. He changed the women into fanged versions of themselves, and they start attacking one another. It reveals for the first time all these spirits trapped in Marcosa's soul, and the werewolf begins rending Marcosa with a slash. And once he does, this black bubbly stuff comes up, and these former foes of the werewolf start manifesting themselves, right? Yes. First, it's Dr. Glitter Knight, and he attacks the werewolf. Then it's Moon Knight, and he attacks the werewolf. Then it's the Hangman, and he attacks the werewolf, right? He's hanging him just like that cover shows.
Just like the cover there,
And the werewolf finally takes all of his strength and pulls him down and slams him into, I think, Glitter Knight, whose chest shoots at and hits Moon Knight. So he causes them all to destroy one another.
They take out each other,
Yeah. And and then they ultimately, the werewolf defeats Marcosa. And the spirits promise that if he helped them defeat Marcosa, they would help him. And so one of the spirits sacrificed himself. I think it was the peasant that he was talking to.
Yes.
Okay. There you go. You were locked on for a little while there, so I didn't know if your internet hung up.
He said that he would have to sacrifice himself to.
Well, he said one of them would. He decided he would be the one to do it to save Buck's life.
To save Buck's life and take down Marcosa and the peasant.
Correct.
Once he got into Jack, now he's able to control. Later on, he will control the transformation.
Yeah.
But what of a mess of a story this is.
Yeah. And there's an epilogue here too, which is very interesting, where Jack's essentially mentally saying goodbye to the others, Topaz, Lissa, Buck, in the story. And so I would love to dive into that to find out what was going on there, where they're saying, hey, we're going to cancel this. And they said, no, we're not going to cancel it. What quite happened? Or they were saying, you have to take this in a radical new direction, or we're going to cancel it. Something happened there.
Yeah, it looked to me like they were thinking of canceling it because of that. They sort of did like end stories for everybody. All the major players, and there's a write up in the letters page where it says, no, we're not canceling, but it could have been right. So I think that they wrote that, and it was too late to change it by the time they had already changed their mind and continued it.
But fortunately, that's the end of that arc.
Yeah, fortunately, mercifully, it's the end of this really messy story.
Yeah, I did not like it very much at all.
It was a lot of padding. It was very convoluted. It didn't really, except for the fact that that Jack sort of grew and had how now extra kind of they're sort of transforming him, right?
Correct.
Because then later now we get the three who are all and all that stuff.
Yes.
But it was just way too convoluted. 4 issues could have been done in 2.
Yep. Absolutely, easily.
And you didn't have to go through all this backstory with the peasant and the Marconi.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't even appear until the second one. It was all
it added so little to it. I agree. Yeah.
Anyway, okay, all right. Let's bring the sucker home. Last story arc. No, actually, no. 2 story arcs.
Yeah. Ed Hannigan with the cover art.
Ed Hannigan with the cover here. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Real nice wolf story here. So this is the Mac story, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. Do you want to do that, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, I'll take care of it. I'll take this one. So, so once again, Jack goes out into the wilderness, assumingly, so that he won't be encountering anybody. But he comes across this cabin, and there are wolves all around it, attacking the cabin. These wolves are thin. They're like hungry. They're just they're desperate.
Ribs sticking out.
Yeah, Rick's right. That's what he says. That's how he describes them, as their ribs are sticking out. So they're obviously, when you're that desperate, you don't want to be meeting wolves, right? I mean, that's they it's like life or death essentially. Yeah. And the wolves are being shot at through this cabin, through the window of this cabin. And the Jack Werewolf is now, kind of a little bit wondering what's going on. So he's thinking, well, these wolves are my brothers, that they're not going to harm me. Wrong, because they're starving, so they'll shred anything. So they start fighting him, and the gun from the cabin is picking off some of the wolves, and finally, the wolves, I guess,
Jack's fighting back too.
Jack's fighting back. He kills or thrashes several of them.
Yeah.
And then finally they had enough somehow, and they go away. But Jack, again, the sun, the moon goes down, and he's out there unconscious because of the amount of effort he's put out there. And he's found by the guy in the cabin, this guy named Mac, right? And he's like unconscious, the whole thing. He tends to him, and he tells him he's there with his daughter, who's like a baby,
Mora, right? Yeah,
right. And he tells him the story that why he's out here. Apparently, he's divorced, and his wife remarried this piece of work. Who, in order to, and this is weird, but I think I know where he's going here. So in order to be worthy of her love, or to impress her, because she had custody of the child, but she was a bad mother and beat her up and abused her and stuff. So Matt
Morrison, because she wants her daughter back. So this guy Morrison's like, all right, whatever, I'll get her back.
He's like, I'll get her back, even
for the girl. Yeah.
Even though he doesn't care about the kid, he just wants the lady to love him. Or, ostensibly. That's not love, but anyway, you know what I mean.
That's not. Hold on, let me write that. It's not love. Okay, got it.
So he tells Jack this story, and he's giving him food and everything. And now it's getting late, and he's afraid. Mac is afraid that he'll be found out. Now this happened in the city. He moved out here to avoid Morrison and his gang, right?
Right.
So, but later that night, a couple trucks show up, and that's Morrison and his, confidants, men, whatever.
Right. That's the cabin that Mac and his wife stayed at for their honeymoon. He knew ultimately they'd find it, right?
Yeah, he knew ultimately. So they were going to move, but they can't leave because his car broke down like 10 miles down the road.
Correct.
He didn't want to let Jack leave because Jack is turning into a werewolf, but he knew he had to leave.
Yeah.
he didn't want to become the werewolf in the cabin.
Right.
So he tries to, push him and everything. But then the Morrison guys come and they throw this tear gas into the cabin.
Yeah.
And during that happening, Jack becomes the werewolf. And Mac and his daughter go out the back, and Jack goes out. Did I back?
Are you there?
Am I back?
Yeah,
Am
you're back.
Okay. So Jack, as the werewolf, they start shooting at him, and they don't stop him. They couldn't. I guess at first they couldn't see it was him, but then when he got close, he started shredding them. He started throwing them around.
Right.
And then, of course, they start running because now they're like, yeah, I'm not here to fight no werewolf.
Right.
But he ultimately catches up to Morrison. Bill, finish it off because my internet is playing tricks.
Okay, yeah. So I think that ultimately he catches up to Morrison and kills Morrison. I don't know. I don't remember if he went off a cliff or something, but yeah, I just know that he catches him and kills him. But the important part about this issue is there are 3 separate visions. Jack, once he was knocked out by Mac, when Mac was fighting him, Jack had a vision from the 3 who are one of a hooded figure who said Jack has a purpose. In Haiti, because it made a break, Raymond Coker had a vision of a serpentine woman who said that Coker needs to find Jericho Drum. And I think Lissa and Topaz are with Buck, and Buck's in a wheelchair now. So you know what happened to him, at least at this point. He is paralyzed in his Malibu beach house. And Lissa and Topaz had a vision of a goat-headed being that's telling them that they need to wait at the beach house. Don't go out and look for Jack right now. So those are the important things that's kind of set up this arc that go into there. But yes, ultimately, the werewolf catches and kills Morrison. There's another vision that tells Jack that it's time for him to return from his retreat, his forest retreat. And at the end of the issue, Mac and Mora, they take off, so they get away. And Coker ultimately finds Brother Voodoo.
Correct.
All right, 39. Let's run into that one real quick. Rich Buckler with the cover on this one. But responding to Buck's phone call, Jack meets everybody at the beach house. Coker and Brother Voodoo are there. So this was kind of fun. I enjoyed Brother Voodoo being introduced into the series, although I didn't necessarily enjoy all of this arc right here. It was still pretty good. And I think that made it more fun for me. Yeah, but okay. Yeah, they discussed that they each had their visions. And there are some Zuvembi attacks, particularly Coker mentions, his great-grandfather, but there are several things that they're discussing. But then the Zuvembis attack their house, and they take Coker away. They take him prisoner. Well, Brother Voodoo and the werewolf defeat these fake Zuvembis. They seem to be made of mist, or they're not totally solid beings, live dead beings. They kind of burst into light. So Brother Voodoo reverses Jack's change with the spirit of his brother Daniel. And you'll see that him using the spirit of his brother Daniel a lot to change things or alter things or help turn the tide of a battle. They lead for Haiti and they head for Devil's Grotto, which is where, coincidentally, Lieutenant Northrop, who is in Haiti, is also headed. That seems to be an epicenter of a lot of the things that are going on with the Zuvembis and with the werewolves and everything else. Ultimately, they're attacked by real Zuvembis. Topaz is knocked out. Brother Voodoo and the werewolf defeat these real Zuvembis. Jack now realizes he has some control over the werewolf. They get to Devil's Grotto. They realize it's filled with beasts, and they take some kind of tunnel to the bottom of it, and they see that Coker's there, and he's bound in midair with red light. And Zuvembis emerge from these stone walls, and guess who is behind the whole thing? By gosh, by golly, it's Dr. Glitter-Knight. And that's where issue 39, I believe, ends. Are you back, sir? All right. I think Roger's still trying to connect. So issue number 40, Ed Hannigan cover. Brother Voodoo sends the spirit of Daniel to Dr. Glitter-Knight. And maybe should I remove you and have you come back? Oh, there you are. Cool. All right. So we're on to issue number 40. I see you, sir. Dr. Glitter-Knight has Daniel's spirit sent by Brother Voodoo into him, and it starts attacking him. It manages to free Coker, but Dr. Glitter-Knight sends the spirit back to Brother Voodoo with a whole bunch of bad juju mixed in with it. It's corrupted now, and so it's tearing Brother Voodoo apart as it's back inside of him. Jack and Topaz end up battling the Zuvembis. Brother Voodoo recovers. He cleanses the spirit of his brother. Dr. Glitter-Knight flees with Coker and Topaz, and Jack and Brother Voodoo, they go into this pit, which is like another dimension. Jack becomes the werewolf, but he can think and he can talk. They find the three who are one, and they realize they used to be the five who are all. But Dr. Glitter-Knight was one of those five, and he destroyed a fourth of those five. And he turned against the other three. They defeated him and exiled him, and he ended up on Earth. These three who are all tell Jack to prepare for a change that includes a death.
Yeah.
All right. So Lieutenant Northrop finds this pit, and it looks like he's devoured by a serpent. At the bottom of the pit is a huge black egg, and Jack can enter the egg. Brother Voodoo doesn't, but his spirit Daniel does. And inside the egg, Daniel takes on flesh, and he can actually speak, and he has substance. They realize that Dr. Glitter-Knight is manufacturing these false Zuvembis by using real Zuvembis and siphoning off their energy, using them as like templates. They're surrounded by demons. They see Dr. Glitter-Knight. They see Topaz, who is transformed into like this, like a harpy, a demon of sorts.
Yeah, with leathery wings, a whole bit.
Right. And I think that's the end of 40.
Yeah, it's the end of 40.
You want to try taking 41?
Yeah, I could try. So the internet is just...
Yeah, if you get stuck, I'll jump in. Pablo Marcos, one of my favorites, did the cover on this.
Did the cover on that. Yeah, real nice. So again, this one is a little bit more tighter than the previous story arc, but it's still out there a little bit. So Topaz, like I said, has been corrupted by Glitter-Knight, but however, because of Brother Voodoo and being in that egg thing, the laws don't work in there. I mean, the normal laws of physics don't work.
Right. So
the three who are one, the prophecy is that one has to die for Jack to change. So the change is that Jack, once this person here, which is Fire Eyes,
right,
is released from Glitter-Knight, that he was holding him captive. Yep. in his soul, right. And initially he because he was losing, because the Brother Voodoo and Daniel's possession of him, he had to release him because he was running, he was being outnumbered essentially. And he initially does start fighting with Jack here.
Right.
But what happens to turn that around? I forgot that he realized that he is the one who dies so that Jack get the permanent change. But what transformed him into that realization that he needed to actually defeat Glitter Knight?
Because he has this beam, this light beam that he's using to control Fire Eyes. Brother Voodoo severed that beam.
It. Oh, yeah, that's right.
And so he's no longer being controlled by Glitter Knight at that point, so he can turn on him.
That's it. That's it. That's what it is. Exactly. I read this a couple weeks ago, so my memory's a little hazy.
So he attacks Dr. Glitter Knight, and they destroy one another.
Right.
Right. And the explosion returns Devil's Grotto to its natural state, without all the demons and the black egg and everything else. Lieutenant Northrop realizes after he is still around, he realizes after what happened, he's good with Jack. He's not going to pursue him anymore.
He's not going to pursue,
talk about this werewolf stuff anymore.
He saved his life.
Yeah, exactly. Coker's great grandfather was one of the Zivembis for Dr. Glitter Knight. That's kind of how that tied in. And I guess Fire Eyes was the fourth of the five, and he returns to the other three. Yeah.
He shows up at the end there. Glitter Knight was the fifth, but he was destroyed.
Correct.
So they're now he returns to the fourth, right? So the death they were talking about was not, like just elimination. It was returning back to his original purpose.
Yeah, sort of a metaphorical death, if you will, from one state transitioning to another.
Right.
All right, so for number 42, Dave Cockrum cover. Now, they're in New York City. I think Topaz and Jack are like, hey, let's take a break kind of thing. Let's go on a vacation.
Jack can now control and turn into the werewolf at will and maintain his intelligence.
Okay. Correct. And they see a bank being held up. The masked marauder and his gang are breaking into a bank, right? Iron Man, Tony Stark, sees this same thing. And he goes down to do something at the same time that Jack transforms into the werewolf, saying, hey, I'm going to be a good guy now and try to help people. And they collide. Well, Iron Man thinks that Jack is part of the gang, and so they start battling while the bank is getting robbed. And the marauder fires at Iron Man, who is saved by the werewolf. At that point, he realizes, oh, okay, you're not part of their gang. You're a good guy. But he fires again, and he knocks out both of them and takes off. Iron Man takes the werewolf to the Avengers Mansion to kind of have him nursed by Jarvis to give him, give him some aid. Jarvis is sort of creeped out, but interested in the werewolf and his transformation.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So Topaz went to go get the police while this was happening. So that's why she's not here. And then in Malibu, Lissa, Elaine, and Buck are all visiting at Buck's beach house. Lissa, yeah, exactly. Lissa is knocked out by some mystery assailant that we don't know about, but that Buck recognizes.
Right.
And it's unfortunate this doesn't come to fruition. We don't figure that out. Yeah, but at any point in New York City, the Marauder, he wants to recreate the Tri-Man, which is an android that he had previously created that was defeated by Daredevil. But this time he wants to use the attributes of wild animals, an alligator for its fierceness, let's see, use a cheetah for the speed, a gorilla for the strength. Yeah. And Iron Man knows that the Marauder is Frank Farnham and that he has a warehouse down in this like dock area district. And so he goes there and he finds them. He and the werewolf's with him. They fight the henchmen and they're started to fight them right as the Triana Man as the Marauder calls this new version, starts to come to life.
Yeah, that kooky stuff there.
Yeah.
So the Tri-Animan now is an android. I mean, it's he's a construct, so he's very tough, and he's controlled by the Marauder at this point.
Okay? Right.
And so he's handling, like he's about to actually. Iron Man is crushed under these beams from the well, that's later on actually.
Ernie Chan cover, by the way.
Ernie Chan?
Yep.
Oh, that's a nice one too,
isn't it?
Nice deep purple there. Yeah. So, so they're essentially the Tri-Animan is very, much stronger than even the Marauder thought, right?
Yep.
And during the fight in the warehouse, his controls are destroyed. So the Marauder can't control the Tri-Animan.
Well, yeah, because he kept giving him more power, and he went berserk. Yeah, and destroyed the controls, among other things, in the warehouse. Yeah.
Right. He just went overboard. He's like, oh, let's bring up the juice. Correct. And made him stronger, but it made him just.
But he has a backup set of controls
in the copter.
Correct.
In the helicopter. So he leaves but the Tri-Animan is still tussling with Iron Man and Werewolf, but the Werewolf is still handling the henchmen and stuff there.
Well, when Tri-Animan went berserk, he freed the animals. He mistakenly freed the animals too.
That's right.
And so the werewolf's battling the alligator, the ape, and the cheetah as well. Right.
Exactly. And they're going after the henchmen, and he's battling the animals while they're correct. And Iron Man's after the Tri-Animan. He's like outside, going down into the buildings and all that, and down by the waterfront.
Right.
And during that happening, this building falls on top of Iron Man and pins them under there.
Right. It's a construction site they're at.
Construction site. Yeah. And so the Tri-Animan is actually going on, and he's helpless. He's pinned down there. He's trying to get out, but he's helpless.
Yep.
So Tri-Animan is about to come and put the kibosh on him, and he's about to get loose. And finally, the werewolf catches up to him, kind of tackles him from behind.
Right.
And now Iron Man is in the fight again, and and the Marauder now has control over him. So he's like, okay, now I want you to get after Iron Man and the whole
thing.
Right.
He's in the helicopter at this point.
He's close enough, I guess, so that the controls will work.
Yep.
And he's controlling the Tri-Animan. That's such a weird thing to say.
I know. It is.
But during when that happens, the werewolf I think jumps and grabs the copter, right?
Yep.
And it crashes, and they both crash. And the Marauder is.
No, I think Iron Man shoots a repulsor beam, doesn't he?
Oh, that's right.
He meant to shoot at the Tri-Animan, but it hits the copter instead.
It hits the copter, and the werewolf and the Tri-Animan fall.
Yep.
And the copter does. They all fall. The Tri-Animan falls on the pavement, gets messed up.
Correct.
The copter and the werewolf fall in the water. Then, the werewolf manages to turn the dial off, and the
he turns it off and saves the Marauder.
Saves the Marauder, and the Tri-Animan just falls into the ocean. And then later on, the cops are like, "Hey, where's the money from the bank? It was in the Tri-Animan. It's floating away."
Right.
And they're taking the Marauder away, and Iron Man and the werewolf, say, "Hey, thanks for everything," and part their way, go their parted ways.
Right. And in the police station, Topaz calls Buck's house, and his phone's answered by the police over there. You say Buck's missing, and his house is partially burned down. Boy, there's a lot of burning in this series. Yeah. So she hightails it back to LA.
Yeah.
And I think Jack leaves here because he doesn't know where the heck Topaz is to find Topaz.
Yeah. But again, that's not resolved. We don't have no idea what's going on there. Yeah. Yeah. That's where it ends right there.
Hey, Chop. Good to see you. I don't know if it's. I think second longest in Bronze Age series.
Let's see,
Horror. No, that would be Swamp Thing, right? Would probably be one of the longest.
Well, yeah, if you're talking about Marvel, it would be, because Tomb of Dracula was 70. This was 43. Frankenstein was 19, 18 or 19. Yeah. And Man-Thing had 2 series, one that went 22 and the other one went 10.
Right.
Or 11 or something, yeah. So the second longest Marvel, yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, the Swamp Thing was pretty long too. Okay, recap, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, so I think so it's hard to say, right? I loved this series, still do, up until that haunted house arc. I really think it took several right turns when they should have made left in the series, and it's understandable that things were going on. It feel like they were going to cancel it, then they say we weren't. We want you to change the direction. No, we want you to change the direction to a different way. It feels like they kept making these course corrections until they finally said, you know what, it's just not selling enough. Let's just let the title go. But I think the way he was originally designed as a feral beast who was almost independent of the host body, almost like Ghost Rider with Johnny Blaze, I think that's the effective form that Werewolf by Night needs to be in. I think that they tried to pivot him to make him to sort of bring the two sides together so that Jack's mind could control the werewolf could speak. I think that makes it almost comical to a certain extent. It really removes a heavy dose of the fear factor. I don't like that. And it feels like at the end, they said, all right, you know what we need to do is we need to team him up with superheroes. And that's probably going to be the formula for success. But it looks like they either didn't stick with that, or after the 42nd issue, that before the 43rd was put in fully, they got the results. They said, no, it's not working either, so let's just cancel it. Because at the very end, it looks like they had done most of this series, and then there was text at the end of 43 where Doug's saying, oh, hey, you know, it's goodbye for now kind of thing. So it looks like they didn't know till probably right that issue was going to go to press that it was going to get canceled. But I just felt that was the wrong direction for that character. Essentially, he had a fursuit when he could change into a werewolf at will. He had a fursuit just like an Iron Man suit, and he was just another superhero. And I thought that took away everything that made him unique to begin with.
Yeah, I don't disagree with much of anything you said. When the werewolf persona or the dynamic of him is that unpredictability,
right?
Is that savagery? It's that the fact that you don't know what's going to happen because he doesn't know what's going to happen.
Right.
So that I think is a fabulous dynamic. Unlike like Dracula, which had a backstory, and he had he has certain goals that are sinister, but perhaps are based upon things that he couldn't control. This was something which was just you could have taken this in any direction.
Right.
Because you have a person that has 28 days and then they know that hell's going to come down upon them. Can you imagine the incredible pressure, stress, the psychological issues you would have, right? Yep. They explored that somewhat in the series. But once they started going down the road of, you know what, we're going to take it out of the horror range. We're going to put fantasy elements. We're going to put mystery elements. We're going to put, crime elements. You have to be careful about getting so far afoot from your successful formula,
right,
or the premise, right, that it's unrecognizable, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think these are the good points. Monk, I like the way that he wended in all the different subplots, the characters. They had distinct personalities. They had different motivations and goals, and they were fairly consistent in that. They were three-dimensional to a good degree. Okay. Then you're right. Then you hit that horror story with that made no sense about the motivation of the characters now changed.
Right.
The direction was, it was supernatural, but it wasn't lycanthropy. Now it was some kind of spiritual miasma that controlled the narrative.
Right.
And it was so convoluted, it was so padded and just so contrived that if I was a fan of the character at that point, I'm like, what is this? Right? You're divulging too much from the original text, to sort of speak. But they had great character development. They had tight plotting up until that horror story.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought it was very intriguing that they were trying to find out, how to cure him. But it was almost like The Fugitive, right? That he was always that close for finding the one-armed man, but he never got there.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But this one, he found him. All right. And then the mystery was gone. It was like, you're right. Yeah. He was just another superhero now. Just he had control. He didn't. I mean, maybe later on, maybe that plot line with Buck was something that would revert him back to savagery. You never know, right? But
it's like any TV show, right? Where you have the man and woman with all this sexual tension, but for whatever reason they're never together, and then ultimately they get together, and that seems to ruin the show.
Exactly. Right.
It feels like the same sort of thing here.
Exactly. So throughout the series, though, you had great art with Plug, with Gil Kane, and then Perlin wasn't my favorite, I must admit. His art is just a little bland for this series. I would have liked something with a little more dynamism.
Right.
Not terrible, not bad. It wasn't like it didn't interfere.
Right. That's the key. It didn't detract.
It didn't detract.
Nor did it enhance.
But it didn't enhance. It wasn't like, when I look at something like the Rights and Swamp Thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Where, I mean, his command of those blotches and those mires and those mucks, and the way that he could just expose those in art really enhanced those stories.
Here's the key to Perlin. Because of his art, I feel you really got to appreciate some of the finest writing that Doug Mensch had done in quite some time. Then also, unfortunately, because of his art, you got to really excruciatingly experience some not so good writing from Doug Mensch.
True.
I feel it magnified it on either side.
Yeah, you couldn't hide it. You couldn't hide it at that point. Correct. Because if you could have one or the other, you can have one or the other and sort of be okay with it. But when both go out the window, then the warts really come out.
Absolutely.
Yep. So if Plug had done those haunted house issues, we maybe there was passable. Good night, Gary. But overall, I did enjoy this series. It was very unique, in the protagonist, had all those issues to deal with, and he knew it was coming. He couldn't do anything about it. The supporting cast was, exactly that, a supporting cast. They supported him. They were there for him. They tried everything they can so that he could function on a day-to-day basis. A lot of great little pull-ins from, the Russoffs, from that curse. From Topaz being able to manipulate him a little bit so that as a plot device you could use her, right? That's what I was thinking. Why did you make him able to transform by will? You could have Topaz, and maybe she could lose her abilities and
and then maybe regain it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So but overall, I really enjoyed the series, except for that haunted house storyline, which was I'm trying to just excise it from my head, but other than that, I thought this was much better than average storytelling, average art, altogether a better than average run.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to disagree with much of anything you say. I thought that I thought 75-80% of it was close to brilliant, especially some of the early issues where you really had a Hammer film horror feeling to it. Like nothing I've read in comics from that time. I'd say Tomb of Dracula was better written. I agree. And I don't think most people would deny that. The Tomb of Dracula was brilliant, but it wasn't as horrific and as suspenseful as the first, let's say, 15, 16 issues of Werewolf by Night were. I think overall 75-80% of it was just brilliant. I just think that from that haunted house story arc, it really took a nosedive, and it took a lot longer in its death throes than most series would have. And so you have several issues of what I feel was substandard stories.
Yeah, agreed.
And one last thing, Werewolf by Night 32, it felt like that they put maybe a little bit more into that character than they would a typical ancillary character. I don't think that they're like, yeah, this guy's going to launch and become his own thing and everything, but it felt like they put a little bit more backstory, a little bit more character into Moon Knight than they would a typical baddie turn goodie type character. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's because they wanted him to turn at some point and then finish that off that arc. But what do you think? Do you think they might have had designs for him in the future at that point or not?
Yeah, I think definitely he was going to be, if not a standalone, there was definitely co-star status and coming down the pike here.
Gotcha.
Because although he was in 37 as a simulacra or an illusion, whatever it was, I think Monk really liked that character. He put a lot of effort into that backstory, as you said.
Yeah.
And you know, the fact that he was so dynamic, you know, and just he had depth to him even in that two issue arc.
Yeah.
I think they had plans for him that if this had continued, I believe he would have showed up, and eventually he would have even though he did show up a few months later in Marvel Spotlight.
Right.
I believe they had plans for him either in a team concept or or as a rolling co-star. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Or a foil, some type of foil for Werewolf when he turns into the werewolf, something like that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, he definitely would have made one heck of an adversary.
Absolutely.
Coming down the road. Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone sticking with us to the end. We know it went long, but it's a brilliant series. If you haven't read it, or if you hadn't read it in quite some time, I suggest you pick it up again. It's such a fun read. Normally we would spin the wheel to determine what the next victim is for the retrospective, but Roger and I decided that we want to jump into Omega the Unknown. Not quite as many issues, so we'll be able to do a little bit deeper dive, and we're both excited to do that. So look for that live stream on Roger's channel, probably around late April or so.
Yeah, sounds good. Yep.
And then going forward from that point on, we will spin the wheel, but we will be doing only part one of retrospective. These part twos are taxing. So we'll take things, it'll enable us to look at things like Spider-Woman, perhaps some of the series will run a little bit longer. We'll do maybe the first 20, max 25 issues of something and really comprehensively discuss that. And if you want to get into the ensuing issues, then that would be a good starting point for tracking those down and reading those.
Right. I think we'll give you a pretty good idea by those 20 or 20 some issues, first 2 years or so, whether or not it's something you'd be interested in. So
correct.
All right. Thanks, Bill. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Roger. I appreciate it as always. And thank you, everybody. Thanks for dropping by. And if you watch the rewind, be sure to jump to Metarog's channel Give them a sub if you haven't done so already. And we'll see you next time.
Take care, all.